The military academy on Titan Station floated in the cold darkness of space, a massive structure of steel and glass that had trained soldiers for 30 years. Inside the main hall, 200 new cadets sat in neat rows, their young faces full of excitement and fear. They wore fresh uniforms that still smelled like the factory, and their boots were so new they squeaked against the metal floor. Commander Lisa Grant walked slowly across the stage. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Her uniform carried medals from a dozen campaigns, but her face showed no pride, only a deep tiredness that came from years of war. "Welcome to Titan Station," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "You are here because humanity is dying. The Krellian Empire destroys our colonies one by one. They are stronger than us, faster than us. They do not feel fear or pain like we do. You are here to become the soldiers who will stop them." The cadets listened with wide eyes. Some sat up straighter, trying to look brave. Others gripped the armrests of their chairs, suddenly understanding that this was real. They would go to war. Many of them would die. A boy in the third row raised his hand. His name was Jacob Hayes, and he had arrived from Mars just 2 days ago. He was 16 years old with red hair and too many freckles across his nose. His older brother had died fighting the Krellians last year. "Commander," Jacob said, "is it true that only one person ever survived the Alpha program?" The entire hall went silent. 200 cadets stopped breathing. Even the instructors standing along the walls tensed up, their faces going pale. Lisa's jaw tightened. She stared at Jacob for a long moment, and he felt like she could see right through him. "The Alpha program ended 15 years ago," she said slowly. "It has nothing to do with your training." Next question. But Jacob was young and stupid and angry about his dead brother. He kept talking. "They say he survived training that killed everyone else. They say he can move faster than human eyes can follow. They say he is not even human anymore. They say the instructors are afraid to speak his name." Several cadets gasped. An instructor near the door actually stepped backward. Lisa's hands formed fists at her sides. "Cadet Hayes," she said, her voice now cold as ice. "You will report to my office after this assembly. You will run punishment drills until your legs stop working, and you will never mention this subject again. Is that understood?" "Yes, Commander," Jacob whispered, his face burning red. "All of you," Lisa said, turning to face the entire group. "Listen carefully. Some stories should stay buried. Some doors should stay closed. The Alpha program is one of those doors. It was a mistake. It was a tragedy. And if any of you mention it again, you will be removed from this academy immediately." The assembly ended in uncomfortable silence. The cadets filed out quickly, whispering to each other. Jacob stayed in his seat, knowing he had made a terrible mistake on his first day. When everyone else had gone, Lisa walked down from the stage and sat beside him. Up close, Jacob could see the lines around her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly when she thought no one was watching. "My brother died at the Battle of Proxima 4, Jacob said quietly. "Before he left, he told me stories about a soldier who could destroy an entire enemy battalion alone. He said the other soldiers called him the Phantom. He said command would send him to impossible missions, and he would always come back alive while everyone around him died." Lisa closed her eyes. "Your brother should not have told you those things. Was it real? Did the Alpha program really happen?" "Yes," Lisa said after a long pause. "It happened. It was the worst thing I have ever been part of, and I have done many terrible things in this war." She reached into her jacket and pulled out an old photograph. The edges were worn from years of handling. She placed it on the armrest between them. Jacob looked at the photo and his stomach twisted. It showed 32 children standing in rows wearing white training uniforms. They were young, maybe 10 or 11 years old. They smiled at the camera like kids on the first day of school. "These were the cadets of Class Alpha X," Lisa said. 32 children selected from across all the colonies. They had perfect genetics, high intelligence scores, and psychological profiles that suggested they could handle extreme stress. "What happened to them?" Jacob asked, though part of him did not want to know. The war was going badly. The Krellians were winning every major battle. Our scientists said we needed enhanced soldiers, humans modified to be as strong and fast as the enemy. But the modifications only worked on young bodies before the bones and muscles finished growing. Jacob stared at the smiling children in the photo. They experimented on kids? We told ourselves it was necessary. We told ourselves they volunteered. that their families understood the risks. We told ourselves many lies. Lisa's voice cracked slightly. The training lasted 13 months. 7 children died in the first month when their bodies rejected the genetic modifications. 5 more died during combat training. 3 went insane and had to be sedated permanently. By the end, only 1 was left. The Phantom, Jacob whispered. His real name was Danny Pierce. He was a quiet boy from Europa, 11 years old when the program started. He liked reading books about ancient Earth history. He wrote letters to his mother every week. Lisa touched one of the faces in the photograph, a small boy with dark hair and serious gray eyes. This was him before we destroyed his life. Where is he now? Lisa took the photograph back and returned it to her jacket. I do not know. After the program ended, Admiral Campbell used him for special operations, black missions that officially never happened. For years, enemy targets would just vanish in the night. Command posts would be destroyed. Supply lines would collapse. And there would be no evidence except bodies and rumors. So he is still fighting? The war ended 3 years ago. Danny disappeared after that. Some say he died on his last mission. Some say he went to the outer colonies where no one knows his face. Some say he still operates in secret, hunting pirates and criminals. Lisa stood up slowly. But wherever he is not the boy in that photograph anymore. We made him into something else. Something that should never have existed. Jacob looked up at her. Why are you telling me this? You could have just punished me and said nothing. Because you need to understand what happens when we forget that soldiers are people. Because 31 children died so we could create one perfect weapon. Because I see those faces every time I close my eyes. Lisa walked toward the door, then stopped. Your brother was right. The Phantom was real. But there was nothing heroic about how he was created. Remember that when you put on your uniform and pick up your weapon. Remember what it costs to win a war. She left Jacob sitting alone in the empty hall. He looked around at the metal walls covered with honor plaques and battle flags. Somewhere in this station, 15 years ago, children had been turned into weapons. And somewhere in the darkness of space, one of them was still out there, carrying that burden alone. Jacob stood up and headed to Commander Grant's office for his punishment. But as he walked through the corridors, he could not stop thinking about the boy with gray eyes in the photograph, and wondering what kind of man he had become. 15 years earlier, on the same station, the war was going very badly for humanity. Every week brought news of another colony destroyed, another fleet defeated, another 1,000 soldiers dead. The Krellians seemed unstoppable. They could survive in the vacuum of space without suits. They could heal from wounds that would kill a human in seconds. They felt no fear and showed no mercy. Admiral George Campbell sat in his office reviewing casualty reports when the call came through. It was from Dr. Patricia Moore, head of the military's Genetic Research Division. We have a proposal, she said. It will be controversial. Many people will call it immoral. But it might be our only chance to survive this war. George listened as she explained the plan. Take children before their bodies finished growing. Modify their genes to make them stronger, faster, smarter. Add neural implants to speed up their learning. Change their bone structure to make them nearly unbreakable. Create enhanced soldiers who could match the Krellians in combat. How young? George asked, his stomach already sinking. 10 to 12 years old. Any older and the modifications will not integrate properly. Any younger and they will not survive the process. George was quiet for a long time. He thought about his own daughter, safe on Earth, playing in the garden of their home. He thought about asking parents to give up their children for such a purpose. The survival rate? He finally asked, unknown. Perhaps 50%. Perhaps less. And if they survive, what kind of life will they have? Patricia hesitated. They will be weapons, Admiral. Very effective weapons. But they will never be normal children again. The program was approved 1 week later. 32 children were selected from across the colonies, chosen for their exceptional genetics and test scores. Their parents were told it was a special training program, an honor, a chance for their children to become heroes. Most of the parents were military families who understood duty and sacrifice. Danny Pierce arrived from Europa on a cold Tuesday morning. He was small for his age, with dark hair that fell over his eyes and a quiet way of speaking that made people lean in to hear him. His mother hugged him goodbye at the transport dock and made him promise to write letters every week. You are going to do great things, she told him, wiping tears from her face. Your father would be so proud. Danny's father had died in the mines when Danny was 6. His mother worked 3 jobs to keep their small apartment in the agricultural domes. When the military offered to pay for Danny's education and training, she had cried with relief. The children of Class Alpha X met in the main training hall, nervous and excited. They came from different worlds and backgrounds, but they all shared the same dream of becoming heroes. They introduced themselves, shared stories about their homes, and promised to look out for each other. Instructor Kyle Morrison welcomed them with a warm smile. He was a decorated combat veteran with a kind face and an easy way of talking to kids. "You are the best and brightest humanity has to offer," he told them. "This training will be hard, but we believe in every one of you." Captain Helen Drake ran the medical operations. She was younger than Kyle, with blonde hair always pulled back in a tight ponytail. She seemed nervous as she explained the first round of enhancements. "There will be some pain," she said, "but we will manage it carefully. You are all very brave for volunteering." The children did not really understand what was about to happen to them. They thought it would be like getting shots at the doctor's office, maybe a few days of soreness. They had no concept of what genetic modification actually meant. The first child died on day 3. Her name was Susan Clark, a girl from Mars with bright red hair. Her body rejected the initial modifications and her organs began shutting down one by one. The doctors worked for 18 hours to save her, but she died screaming in pain while the other children listened from their rooms. 6 more children died in the first month. Each death was announced as a complication, an unfortunate reaction, something that could not have been predicted. The surviving children grew quieter with each loss. They stopped talking about going home. They stopped smiling. Danny survived the initial modifications better than most. His body accepted the genetic changes with minimal complications. The neural implant integrated into his brain without infection. His bones thickened and strengthened ahead of schedule. Kyle noticed something unusual about Danny during the combat training sessions. The boy learned faster than seemed possible. After seeing a technique demonstrated once, he could perform it almost perfectly. His reflexes improved day by day until he could catch objects thrown at him without looking. "His enhancement level is beyond our projections," Kyle told Helen one evening. They stood in the observation room watching Danny practice alone in the training hall. He moved through a complex martial arts form with fluid precision, his small body flowing like water. "We should slow down his enhancement protocol," Helen said. "His neural activity is already at dangerous levels. If we push him too hard, he might have a psychotic break. The Admiralty wants results. They do not care about the risks." By month 6, only 18 children remained alive. The training intensified. They were taught to use every weapon humans had invented. They learned to survive in hostile environments with no supplies. They were dropped on frozen moons and burning deserts and told to find their way back. Danny continued to excel at everything. He was not the strongest or the fastest in the class, but he was the most consistent. He never gave up. He never complained. He just kept getting better, but his eyes changed. The bright curiosity of childhood faded away, replaced by something harder and colder. He stopped writing letters to his mother. He stopped talking to the other children except when necessary. At night, when the others cried quietly in their bunks, Danny lay awake staring at the ceiling. The instructors began to worry. Kyle tried to connect with Danny during training sessions, asking him how he felt if he wanted to talk about anything. Danny always gave the same answer. "I am fine, sir. Ready to continue training." Helen ran psychological evaluations on all the remaining children. Most showed signs of trauma and stress, which was expected. But Danny's results were concerning in a different way. He showed almost no emotional response to anything. Pain, fear, joy, sadness, all of it registered at minimal levels. "He is shutting down emotionally," Helen told Admiral Campbell during a video call. "The modifications are working on his body, but they are destroying his mind." "Can he still function as a soldier?" George asked. "Yes, but he will not be the child you recruited. He is becoming something else. Then the program is working as intended." Month 13 brought the final test. The 12 surviving children were loaded into transport pods and sent to an abandoned research station in the Kuiper Belt. They were told that enemy forces had infiltrated the facility and their mission was to eliminate all hostiles. What they did not know was that there were no enemy forces. The hostile contacts on their sensors were holograms, fake signals, ghosts created by the instructors. The real test was psychological. The instructors wanted to see how the children would respond to isolation, fear, and the belief that enemies surrounded them. The first child died within 8 hours, shooting at shadows until his squad mates restrained him. He broke free and ran into an airlock, cycling it before anyone could stop him. His body drifted off into space. Paranoia spread through the remaining children like a disease. They began to suspect each other. Who was really human? Who had been replaced by the enemy? Accusations led to fights. Fights led to deaths. Danny tried to stay neutral, but neutrality was seen as suspicious. 3 children cornered him in a storage bay, convinced he was an enemy agent. He fought back instinctively, his enhanced reflexes and training taking over. When it ended, all 3 were unconscious and Danny's hands were shaking. He found a secure room and barricaded himself inside, listening to the sounds of fighting throughout the station. One by one, the children killed each other. Some died fighting. Some died from accidents in the dark. Some simply gave up and stopped moving. After 48 hours, only Danny remained alive. He sat in the command center surrounded by the bodies of his classmates, children he had trained with for over a year, children who had become his only family. When the instructors finally came to retrieve him, they found him sitting perfectly still, his gray eyes empty of all emotion. Medical teams rushed forward to check his vital signs, but physically he was fine. Mentally, something fundamental had broken. Kyle approached him slowly. "Danny, can you hear me? It is over. You are safe now." Danny looked up at him with those empty eyes. "I understand what you did. There were no enemies. You wanted to see if we would destroy each other. You wanted to know if your modifications created soldiers or monsters." Kyle had no answer. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow make it better. But there was nothing he could say that would change what had happened. "I am the answer to your question," Danny said quietly. "I survived because I became exactly what you wanted. I am not human anymore. I am your weapon." I hope it was worth 31 lives. The station was sealed immediately after that. Class Alpha X was classified at the highest level. The families of the dead children were told their sons and daughters had died in training accidents. No details were provided. No bodies were returned. The parents cried, and after the final test, Danny Pierce spent 6 months in a white room with no windows. Medical teams studied him like he was an alien specimen, running tests every day, measuring his reflexes, scanning his brain, trying to understand what the Alpha X program had created. The modifications had worked better than anyone predicted. His reaction time was 3 times faster than baseline human. His bones were nearly unbreakable. His learning capacity seemed unlimited. He could read an entire book in an hour and remember every detail. He could watch someone perform a skill once and replicate it perfectly. But the psychological damage was obvious. He showed almost no emotional response to anything. He ate when told to eat. He slept when told to sleep. He answered questions with minimal words. The doctors called it severe dissociation, a complete disconnect between his mind and his feelings. Admiral George Campbell visited Danny in month 4 of his isolation. He found the boy sitting on his bed, reading military tactical manuals in 3 different languages. Danny looked up when George entered, his gray eyes showing recognition but no other emotion. "How are you feeling?" George asked, sitting in the chair provided. "My physical condition is excellent, all systems functioning within acceptable parameters." Danny's voice was flat, mechanical. "I asked how you feel, not about your condition. I do not understand the difference anymore." George was quiet for a moment. He had authorized the Alpha X program, believing it was necessary to save humanity. He had reviewed the psychological profiles and told himself the children could handle it. Now, looking at this hollow-eyed boy, he understood the true cost of his decision. "The war is getting worse," George said finally. "We are losing colonies every week. The Krellians advance deeper into our territory. We need soldiers who can turn the tide." "You need weapons," Danny corrected. "Soldiers think and feel and question orders. Weapons just do what they are designed to do." "Is that what you want to be? A weapon?" Danny closed his book and looked directly at George. "What I want does not matter anymore. You made me into this. You killed my classmates to create me. Either use me or lock me away forever. Those are the only options that make sense. What if there was a third option? What if you could choose your own path? I am 13 years old. I have spent more time learning to kill than anything else. I have no family anymore. My mother thinks I died in a training accident because that is what you told her. What path could I possibly choose? George had no good answer to that. So he made Danny an offer. Work for Special Operations Command. Take on missions that regular soldiers could not complete. In exchange, he would have access to the best equipment, medical care, and eventually, when the war ended, a chance at a real life. Danny agreed because there was nothing else to agree to. He understood that he would be used as a weapon whether he consented or not. At least this way he could have some illusion of choice. His first mission came 1 week later. A Krellian command post on a frozen moon in the Outer Rim. Intelligence suggested 40 enemy soldiers, all equipped with advanced armor and weapons. The post controlled communications for an entire sector. If it could be destroyed, human forces could launch a surprise attack. They dropped Danny on the moon's surface at night, alone, with minimal equipment. He had a plasma rifle, some explosives, a survival kit, and his enhancements. The temperature was negative 100 degrees. The atmosphere was toxic. A normal human would die in minutes without a protective suit. Danny did not need a suit. The genetic modifications had changed his body's ability to regulate temperature and process oxygen. He could survive in environments that would kill anyone else. He approached the command post on foot, moving across the frozen landscape like a shadow. The Krellians had sensors, guards, automated defenses. None of it mattered. Danny had studied their security protocols during his isolation. He knew exactly where the weak points were. The attack lasted 17 minutes. Danny moved through the facility like death itself, silent and unstoppable. The Krellians never understood what was happening. They saw movement in the corners of their vision, heard sounds in the ventilation systems, found their comrades dead in the darkness. By the time they realized they were under attack by a single infiltrator, it was too late. The explosives were already planted. Danny triggered them remotely from 5 kilometers away, watching the command post collapse into fire and ice. The extraction team found him waiting at the pickup coordinates, covered in frost and enemy blood but otherwise unharmed. "Holy hell," the pilot whispered. "You actually did it. 40 enemy soldiers and you walked out without a scratch." Danny said nothing. He just climbed into the transport and closed his eyes during the flight back to base. That was the first mission. Over the next 5 years, there would be 47 more. The missions became increasingly impossible. Enemy admirals who were surrounded by elite guards, supply depots buried deep underground, weapons facilities that regular forces could not penetrate. Every time Danny succeeded. Every time he returned alive while his targets did not. The other soldiers began to talk about him in whispers. They called him the Phantom because he seemed to appear and disappear like a ghost. They said he could move faster than human eyes could follow. They said he felt no pain and showed no fear. They said he was not really human anymore. The instructors from Alpha X heard these stories and felt sick with guilt. Kyle Morrison transferred to teaching positions far from combat zones, unable to face what he had helped create. Helen Drake requested reassignment to logistics, spending her nights drinking and trying to forget the faces of the dead children. Only Admiral Campbell maintained regular contact with Danny. Every few months, he would visit whatever station Danny was operating from, sit across from the young man and try to have a conversation. Danny was 18 now, though his face remained eerily youthful. The enhancements had slowed his aging process. He might live to be 150, assuming something did not kill him first. "Do you ever think about after the war?" George asked during one visit. "No," Danny replied simply. "You should. The war will not last forever. You need to have plans for what comes next. What comes next is I continue being a weapon until I am no longer useful. Then I will be retired, which probably means eliminated. The government will not want someone like me walking around during peacetime. I would not let that happen." Danny almost smiled, but not quite. "You authorized Alpha X. You used a 13-year-old boy for black operations missions. You have done many things in the name of necessity. Why would my elimination be any different?" George wanted to argue, but found he could not. Danny was right. The military-industrial complex he served would see a highly enhanced killer as a liability once the war ended. There would be quiet discussions about disposal methods, about acceptable losses, about the greater good. "Then what do you want?" George asked. "If you think you are going to be killed anyway, what is the point of all this?" Danny was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something that might have been emotion, though it was hard to tell. I want the 31 children who died on Titan Station to have died for something. I want their deaths to mean that humanity survived. So I keep fighting. I keep completing missions. I keep being the weapon you created. Because if I stop, if I give up, then they died for nothing. That is a heavy burden to carry alone. I have been alone since I was 11 years old. I am used to it. The war continued. Danny's legend grew. Enemy forces began to fear the Phantom more than entire human fleets. Command posts would surrender rather than risk his attention. Supply lines would reroute just based on rumors of his presence. But the cost was visible in his eyes, even if he claimed to feel nothing. Each mission took something from him. Each kill added weight to his shoulders. He was 20 years old and looked like he was 30. The enhancements kept his body young but could not hide the exhaustion in his soul. On Mission 43, Danny infiltrated a Krellian battleship and eliminated the admiral commanding it. As he moved through the ship afterward, setting charges to destroy it, he found a datapad containing photos of the admiral's family, Krellian children playing in bioluminescent gardens, a mate holding an infant. Danny stared at the photos for a long time. Then he set the charges anyway and left the ship to its fate. Later, on the transport back to base, he tried to feel something about what he had just done. Guilt, shame, satisfaction, anything. But there was only emptiness. The same emptiness that had filled him since the day he survived Alpha X. Somewhere in the universe, his mother lived on Europa, believing her son had died in a training accident. She kept his room exactly as he had left it, with books about ancient history and posters of famous explorers. She talked about him like he was a hero, never knowing the truth. Danny wondered sometimes if that was better. Let her remember the quiet boy who loved to read. Let her never know about the weapon that boy had become. The missions continued. The war ground forward, and Danny Pierce, the last survivor of Class Alpha X, remained alone in the darkness, carrying the ghosts of 31 children, and wondering if salvation was even possible for someone like him. 10 years after Class Alpha X ended, the war had reached a strange stalemate. The Krellian Empire controlled about 1/3 of what used to be human space, but their advance had stopped. Military analysts credited improved tactics and better technology. A few high-ranking officers knew the truth. One man was destroying the enemy's command structure faster than they could rebuild it. Danny Pierce stood on an observation deck of an abandoned mining station, watching Krellian patrol ships drift past in the distance. He was 27 years old but could pass for 20. His body remained lean and hard, covered in scars from 100 battles. His gray eyes, once bright with childhood curiosity, now held only cold calculation. His neural implant chimed softly. An encrypted message from Admiral Campbell. New mission parameters uploading. Priority Alpha. Danny accessed the data through his implant, processing the information faster than a normal human could read. A Krellian admiral named Vexthor had established a major base in the Outer Rim. The base coordinated attacks on 3 human colonies and served as a supply hub for enemy operations across an entire sector. Intelligence estimated nearly 1,000 enemy soldiers stationed there, along with automated defense systems that had destroyed 2 human fleet assaults. The mission was simple: infiltrate the base, eliminate Admiral Vexthor, and survive until extraction. The expected survival rate was listed as 0%. This did not concern Danny. Most of his missions had similar ratings. He packed his equipment with practiced efficiency. Plasma rifle with extended charge pack. Monoblade forged from materials that could cut through Krellian armor. Breaching charges. Medical kit filled with medications designed for his enhanced biology. Environmental suit, though he could survive in vacuum for short periods without it. His ship was small and fast, painted black to blend with space. He piloted it himself, having learned long ago that he worked better alone. Other soldiers slowed him down, asked questions, showed fear. Danny worked best when there was no one to worry about except himself. The journey to the Outer Rim took 4 days. Danny spent the time reviewing tactical data and maintaining his equipment. He ate exactly enough to fuel his enhanced metabolism. He slept for precisely 6 hours per day. Everything about his life was optimized for efficiency. On the 4th day, he allowed himself a moment of reflection, something he usually avoided. He thought about his mother on Europa, who believed he had died 16 years ago. He thought about his classmates from Alpha X. their faces frozen in his memory at 10 and 11 years old. He wondered what they would think of what he had become. The Krellian base appeared ahead, a massive structure built into a large asteroid, bristling with weapons platforms and sensor arrays. Any normal approach would be detected immediately and destroyed within seconds. Danny was not planning a normal approach. He cut his ship's engines and let momentum carry him toward the asteroid field surrounding the base. Using only minimal thrusters, he navigated through the floating rocks, timing his movements to stay in the sensor dead zones. It took 18 hours of precise flying, but he reached the asteroid without triggering any alarms. He attached his ship to the asteroid's surface with magnetic clamps and proceeded on foot. The base had multiple entry points, all heavily defended. Danny chose none of them. Instead, he spent 12 hours cutting through solid rock with a mining laser, creating his own entrance into the base's lower maintenance levels. Inside, the base was huge, with corridors stretching in every direction. Danny moved through it like a ghost, sticking to ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels. He avoided all contact with enemy forces, taking note of patrol patterns and security measures. For the first 24 hours, he just observed. He watched guard shifts change. He studied the layout of command areas. He identified emergency protocols and escape routes. Normal soldiers would rush in shooting. Danny understood that the key to impossible missions was patience. On the second day, he began his real work. Small acts of sabotage at first. A tampered air recycler here, a corrupted data junction there. Nothing that would cause immediate alarm, but enough to create confusion and drain resources. By day 3, the Krellians knew something was wrong. Systems were failing in random patterns. Guards were reporting strange sounds in the ventilation systems. Maintenance crews were finding evidence of someone moving through restricted areas. Admiral Vexthor called an emergency meeting with his command staff. "How many infiltrators?" he demanded, his alien features twisted with anger. "Sensors indicate only one," his security chief replied. "But that cannot be accurate. The scope of the sabotage suggests an entire team. One human is causing all this damage." Vexthor could not believe it. "Perhaps it is the one called Phantom," another officer suggested quietly. The other Krellians shifted uncomfortably. Even the enemy had heard the stories. "Deploy all security forces," Vexthor ordered. "Search every corridor, every room, every vent. Find this human and kill it." But Danny was always 3 steps ahead. While 800 soldiers searched the base's main levels, he was in the maintenance tunnels beneath them, moving toward his primary target. He had located Admiral Vexthor's command center, a fortified area in the base's core, protected by security doors and elite guards. Getting inside took patience and precision. Danny spent 14 hours crawling through ventilation shafts, pausing whenever sensors swept past his position. The shafts were barely large enough for his body, and parts were so hot they would have burned unmodified flesh. But his enhanced physiology could handle it. Finally, he reached a position directly above the command center. Through a maintenance grate, he could see Admiral Vexthor below, surrounded by 6 elite guards. They were all focused on holographic displays showing the base's security status. Danny waited. Hours passed. His legs cramped in the confined space, but he did not move. He controlled his breathing to near silence. He became part of the machinery surrounding him. Then the moment came. The guards received an alert about a possible sighting in Sector 7. 5 of them rushed out, leaving only 1 guard with the Admiral. Danny dropped through the grate like death from above. His monoblade flashed in the light. The guard died before his weapon cleared its holster. Admiral Vexthor spun around, reaching for his sidearm, but Danny was already there. The fight lasted 7 seconds. When it ended, Vexthor lay on the floor, his multiple eyes staring at nothing. Danny activated his communication device. Target eliminated. Requesting extraction. Admiral Campbell's voice came through, distorted by distance and encryption. Negative, Phantom. Enemy reinforcements are converging on your position. You need to hold the command center for 6 hours until our fleet can arrive for pickup. Danny looked at the blast doors. He could already hear hundreds of soldiers assembling outside. Understood. For 6 hours he held that room alone. The Krellians threw everything at him. Infantry assaults, combat drones, chemical weapons, shaped charges that blew holes in the walls. They attacked in waves, believing that eventually sheer numbers would overwhelm him. They were wrong. Danny had been trained since childhood to fight in impossible situations. His enhancements made him faster, stronger, more durable than any normal human. His neural implant processed tactical data in real time, predicting enemy movements before they happened. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the modifications and trauma, was the stubborn will of a boy who had survived when everyone else died. The room became a nightmare. Bodies piled up in the doorways. The walls were scorched black from plasma fire. The air grew thick with smoke and the smell of death. Danny's armor was destroyed. His body was covered in wounds that would have killed a normal human 10 times over, but he kept fighting. When the human fleet finally breached the base and reached the command center, they found Danny unconscious on the floor, buried under dead enemies. Medical teams rushed forward, unsure if he was even alive. He woke up 3 days later in a medical bay aboard a human carrier. Admiral Campbell sat beside his bed, looking old and tired. "You did it," George said quietly. "Vexthor's death has thrown the Krellian command structure into chaos. Their advance has stalled completely. We might actually win this war because of what you did." Danny stared at the ceiling. His body ached despite the medications flowing through his veins. "How many more missions?" "I do not know. As many as it takes, and then what? When the war ends, what happens to me?" George had been dreading this question for years. "I do not know that either. You should figure it out soon, because I do not think I can do this much longer." Danny's voice was quiet, but there was something in it that George had never heard before. Exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion. Something deeper. The exhaustion of a soul that had been pushed beyond all reasonable limits. "What do you need?" George asked. Danny closed his eyes. "I need to stop being a weapon, even if just for a little while. I need to remember what it feels like to be human. I will see what I can do." But both of them knew the truth. The war was not over. Danny was too valuable to be retired. And somewhere out there, the next impossible mission was already waiting for the Phantom, the last survivor of Class Alpha X, the boy who had become a myth. 3 years after the mission that nearly killed him, the war ended. Not with a final battle or great victory, but with negotiations and treaties. The Krellian Empire agreed to withdraw from human territories in exchange for trade agreements and recognition of their existing borders. Politicians declared it a triumph of diplomacy. Soldiers knew the truth. Both sides were exhausted and bleeding, and neither could afford to continue fighting. Danny Pierce sat in a debriefing room on Earth, the first time he had set foot on humanity's homeworld since he was 10 years old. He was 30 years old now, though his enhanced biology made him look barely 25. Across the table sat Admiral George Campbell, retired but still carrying influence, and Commander Lisa Grant, who had been called back specifically to handle Danny's case. "Your service is officially complete," Lisa said, reading from a datapad. "The government is prepared to offer you full military honors, a substantial pension, access to psychological counseling, and assistance with reintegration into civilian society." Danny sat perfectly still, his gray eyes unreadable. "Reintegration into what exactly?" "I was taken when I was 10. I have spent 2/3 of my life learning to kill. I do not know how to be a civilian. That is what the counseling is for," Lisa replied, though her voice was not entirely confident. "No amount of counseling will make me normal. You modified my genes. You changed my brain structure. You trained me to see every room as a battlefield and every person as either an ally or a threat. Those things cannot be undone." George leaned forward. "What do you want, Danny? Just tell us. After everything you have done for humanity, you deserve to have a choice." Danny was quiet for a long time. Through the window behind George, he could see the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon, blue and endless. Somewhere out there, families were celebrating the end of the war, never knowing the price that had been paid in blood and innocence. "I want to stop being what you made me," Danny finally said. "But we both know that is impossible. So I want something else instead." "What?" Lisa asked. "I want to use what I am for something I choose. Not missions assigned by admirals. Not government operations. My choice, my targets, my purpose." George's face darkened. "You are talking about becoming a vigilante. I am talking about hunting the predators that regular law enforcement cannot touch. Pirates who raid colony transports. Slavers who steal children from frontier worlds. Warlords who carve out little empires in the outer systems. The war might be over, but there are still monsters out there preying on innocent people. If you do this, we cannot protect you," George said. "No official support, No backup, no legal immunity. You would be on your own. I have been on my own since I was 11 years old, Danny replied. This is not new. Lisa set down her datapad. For what it is worth, I hope you find peace. I know that does not mean much coming from someone who helped destroy your childhood, but I mean it. Danny looked at her for a moment. You carry guilt. I can see it in your eyes. Kyle Morrison drinks himself to sleep every night thinking about Alpha X. Helen Drake transferred to a desk job because she cannot face combat anymore. You all punish yourselves for what you did. Do we not deserve to be punished? Lisa asked quietly. Probably, but guilt is just another luxury. It makes you feel like you are paying for your sins, but it does not change anything. The 31 children are still dead. I am still what you made me. Your guilt changes nothing. The meeting ended shortly after that. Danny was given access to his pension and a small ship suitable for long-range travel. Official records listed him as honorably discharged and retired to a frontier colony. His military file was sealed at the highest classification level. He left Earth the next day without ceremony or farewell. 6 months later, a transport captain named Beth Collins was dragged before a pirate lord named Marcus Kane in the Frontier Systems. Marcus controlled 3 stations and a dozen ships, raiding cargo vessels and selling their crews into slavery. He had operated for 5 years without consequences because he was smart enough to avoid military targets and rich enough to bribe local officials. Beth's crew was bound on the deck of Marcus's command ship, facing the prospect of either ransom or slavery. Marcus walked among them, deciding their fates with casual cruelty. You have a choice, he told Beth. Pay me 2 million credits, or your crew gets sold to the mining colonies where they will work until they die. I do not have that kind of money, Beth said, trying to keep her voice steady. Then I guess your crew better hope they enjoy manual labor. The lights in the command ship went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Marcus's crew grabbed their weapons, shouting into their communication devices, but getting only static in response. What is happening? Marcus demanded, suddenly sounding less confident. The lights came back on. 5 of Marcus's lieutenants lay dead on the floor, killed so quickly and quietly that no one had noticed. The pirate crew spun around, trying to find the threat, but saw nothing except shadows. Then Danny Pierce stepped out of those shadows. He wore simple black clothing and carried a monoblade that gleamed in the emergency lighting. His gray eyes were cold and empty. Who are you? Marcus shouted, raising his plasma pistol. Danny said nothing. He moved like liquid death, closing the distance before Marcus could fire. The blade flashed once. Marcus dropped to the deck, clutching his throat. The other pirates opened fire, filling the command deck with plasma bolts and projectiles. But Danny was already gone, moving through them like a ghost. One by one they fell. Some died instantly. Others lived long enough to wonder what they had just seen. When the shooting stopped, Danny stood alone among the bodies. He walked to where Beth and her crew were tied up and cut their bonds with his blade. Get to your ship and leave this system, he told them. Tell other transporters that this trade route is now protected. Tell them what happened here. Beth stared at him, trying to process what she had just witnessed. Who are you? No one important. Just someone who is tired of watching predators hurt innocent people. He left before she could ask more questions. Back on his ship, Danny accessed Marcus Kane's computer systems and found records of his operations. Names of other pirates, locations of slave markets, evidence of corruption among local officials. Danny spent the next month hunting down everyone connected to Marcus's operation. He did not kill all of them. Some he just scared. Others he left alive but broken, with messages carved into their ships. The Phantom is watching. Choose better. Stories began to spread through the frontier systems. A mysterious figure who appeared when violence threatened the innocent. Who struck from shadows and vanished before anyone could identify him. Who left only bodies and warnings in his wake. The instructors from Alpha X heard these stories. Kyle Morrison, sober for once, listened to a news report about a pirate fleet destroyed in the Outer Rim and knew immediately who was responsible. Helen Drake read intelligence reports about a vigilante operating beyond the law and felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. Commander Lisa, Grant kept the photograph of Class Alpha X on her desk in her new position training regular cadets. She added a note beneath it, words she hoped might somehow reach the one who survived. Not all myths are lies. Some are prayers for redemption. Danny did not hear her prayer. He was too far away on another station tracking another monster. But he carried the faces of his dead classmates with him always. 31 children who had died so humanity could create its perfect weapon. 31 ghosts who haunted his every mission. He would never be normal. The modifications and trauma had seen to that. He would never have a family or a peaceful life. His hands had too much blood on them for peace, but he could choose how to use the weapon he had become. He could hunt the predators instead of being pointed at whoever the government deemed necessary. It was not redemption. Danny knew he was beyond redemption, but it was something, a purpose he chose for himself, a way to honor the memory of the children who had died alongside him. One night, sitting alone on his ship between missions, Danny allowed himself to think about his mother on Europa. She was older now, her hair gray, her hands worn from decades of work. She still kept his childhood room exactly as he had left it, still talked about her son who had died as a hero in training. Maybe that was better. Let her remember the quiet boy who loved reading about ancient heroes. Let her never know about the monster that boy had become. Some truths were too heavy to share. Danny closed his eyes and tried to remember what peace felt like. He could not. That feeling had died on Titan Station along with his classmates. But he could remember their faces. He could carry their memory, and he could make sure they had not died for nothing. Somewhere in the darkness of space, another distress call came through. Another transport under attack. Another group of innocents facing violence from those who preyed on the weak. Danny Pierce, the last survivor of Class Alpha X, the boy who had become a myth, set course for the coordinates. He checked his weapons. He prepared his mind for violence, and he went to do what he was created for, but now on his own terms. The instructors still called him a myth, but Danny knew the truth. He was not a myth. He was just a broken weapon trying to find his own way to make the 31 deaths mean something. And in the cold darkness between the stars, that would have to be enough.